Hey there, travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now, let's begin our journey into the unknown. I've made my living restoring old films, war footage mostly, the kind of grainy reels that end up in documentaries or university archives. Sometimes private collections for veterans' families who want to see their grandfather's war one more time before the film stock disintegrates completely. I work alone, always have. My ex-wife Susan got tired of competing with dead men's memories 3 years ago. Can't say I blame her. My apartment in Portland became half living space, half laboratory. Restoration equipment crowded every surface. Digital scanners, chemical baths, 3 computers running specialized software that cost more than my car. It was a Tuesday, November 11th, 2025, Veterans Day. I was expecting a package, some earjimmer footage a collector wanted cleaned up. Standard job, easy money. What arrived instead changed everything. The delivery came at 4:37 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, ready to call it a day. The knock on my door made me jump. My cat, Kubrick, shot under the couch like he'd been electrified. The delivery man looked nervous. Big guy, maybe 63, built like he moved furniture for a living, but he handled the wooden crate like it might detonate. "Sign here," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. I signed. He left fast, his boots heavy on the stairs. The crate sat on my workbench, 2 ft long, 18 in wide, sealed with actual nails instead of screws. Old school construction. I grabbed my crowbar and pried it open. Inside, nested in straw that smelled like basement mold and decades, were 5 film canisters. The metal was oxidized, rust blooming at every seam. Each lid bore a Roman numeral through V and dates written in what looked like German Gothic script. March 3, 1945, March 15, 1945, March 28, 1945, April 10, 1945, April 15, 1945. My German is passable. March means March. These were from the final months of World War II, right before everything collapsed. Underneath the canisters sat a yellowed envelope. Inside, a single typed note. Payment on completion, $15,000, burn nothing. Return digitized copies to P Box 4419. Helena MT, further instructions will follow. No signature. No explanation of what I was restoring. No client name, $15,000. I needed that money desperately. My rent was 3 weeks overdue, and my landlord had stopped being understanding around week 2. I should have asked questions, should have been suspicious of anonymous clients offering that kind of cash. But desperation makes you stupid, and I was very desperate. I opened canister I. The film inside was 16 militarist stock, the kind used for military field documentation in the 1940s. Brittle with age, damaged by moisture and time. It took me 3 hours just to transfer it to my restoration rig without the whole thing crumbling in my hands. By the time I had the first reel digitized enough to view, it was past 11 at night. Rain hammered my windows. Portland was disappearing into November darkness. The city lights blurred through the downpour. I dimmed my apartment lights, hit play, tape 1, Dare Georgia the Hunter, date, March 3rd, 1945, duration 8 minutes 33 seconds. The footage opened on a man checking his rifle. His hands shook badly enough that I could see it even through the grain of 80-year-old film. He was maybe 55, wearing a heavy wool coat and a hunter's cap with ear flaps. Dense pine forest surrounded him, trees heavy with snow, everything gray and white and cold. The light was dying fast. Maybe 400 p.m. in early March at that latitude. A voice behind the camera said something in German. The man, I later pieced together his name, was Hans Dietrich, nodded and started walking. The camera followed. They were tracking something. Dietrich kept stopping, pointing at the ground. The camera would tilt down to show prints in the snow. I leaned closer to my monitor. The prints were enormous, width of a dinner plate, easy. 4 distinct toe marks, each ending in claw indentations that sank 2 inches into frozen earth. But the stride length made my stomach drop. These weren't bare tracks. Whatever made them was walking upright, bipedal. The The distance between prints was consistent with something tall moving on two legs. Dietrich knelt by one print, touched it with his gloved hand. He looked up at the camera and said something. I didn't need translation. His tone said everything. This was wrong, unnatural. They kept moving deeper into the forest. Shadows lengthened. Dietrich lit a kerosene lantern that threw jittering yellow light across the snow. Then I heard it through my speakers. A sound from somewhere in the distance. Low frequency, felt more than heard, not a wolf howl. I've heard plenty of those in nature documentaries. This was deeper, with a wet resonance in the back of the throat, almost like a human voice trying to imitate a wolf and failing. Dietrich froze mid-step, raised his rifle. The camera operator's breathing suddenly loud on the microphone panned across the terrain. For just a moment, caught in the swaying lantern light, I saw eyes shine. 2 points of yellow reflection, maybe 8 ft off the ground, too high for any wolf, too high for a bear standing upright. Dietrich whispered something urgent in German. He was backing up now, rifle still raised, finger on the trigger. The sound came again, closer, and underneath it. The sharp crack of branches breaking under substantial weight. Whatever was out there was moving, circling them. I could track it by the sounds, moving left, then stopping, then right, testing them, hurting them. Dietrich fired 3 times in rapid succession. The muzzle flash whitewashed the frame, the gunshots deafening even through my headphones. I flinched despite knowing this happened 80 years ago. Silence. Complete suffocating silence for 30 seconds. Just Dietrich's ragged breathing and the hiss of the kerosene lantern. Then something hit him from outside the frame. I didn't see it coming. 1 second, Dietrich was standing there, rifle smoking. The next, he was gone, yanked sideways so violently that the camera operator stumbled. The camera fell. The image spun. Snow, sky, trees, ground. It landed at an angle, lens pointed at nothing useful, but the audio kept recording. Dietrich was screaming, high, terrified shrieks that didn't sound like they could come from a grown man who'd probably lived through the entire war. And underneath his screaming, I heard sounds of struggle, movement in the snow. The screams stopped after maybe 40 seconds. Then, while my hands gripped my desk hard enough to hurt, I heard breathing right up against the microphone. Heavy, congested, definitely not human. Something was examining the camera. The breathing moved away. Footsteps crunched in snow, fading into the distance. The footage ran for another 2 minutes, just the fallen camera filming tree trunks at an angle before cutting to black. I sat staring at my monitor, pulse hammering in my ears. My apartment was silent except for the rain and my own breathing. I checked the run time, 8 minutes 33 seconds. I watched it again and again. By the third viewing, I was taking notes, freeze framing the section with the eyes shine, measuring the approximate height based on the tree trunks in frame, analyzing the audio waveform of that breathing. My clock read 2:14 a.m. before I stopped. Cubry was still under the couch. Smart cat, I should have gone to bed, should have waited until morning, gotten some sleep, approached this fresh. But I was already loading canister 2 into my restoration rig. This one was in slightly better condition. The transfer took 90 minutes. I made coffee while the software worked. Strong black from a bag I'd opened 3 weeks ago. It tasted like overcooked grounds. I drank it anyway. 3:47 a.m. I hit play on the second tape. Tape 2, Diesel the Pack. Date March 15th, 1945. Duration 14 minutes 11 seconds. This footage opened with 4 men in military uniforms checking their weapons. They had 3 hunting dogs on heavy chains, big Dobermans, lean and aggressive looking. An officer, his insignia marked him as equivalent to a sergeant first class, briefed the camera. His name, I'd later learn, was Co. He spoke in clipped military German. I caught maybe every 5th word, but his gestures told the story clearly enough. He pointed at a map, then at the forest, then drew a finger across his throat in a cutting motion. They were going after whatever happened to Dietrich. The unit moved out at dawn. 12 days after the first footage, according to the date stamp in the corner, March 15th, 1945, they found Dietrich's location within an hour. I'm not going to describe what the camera showed in detail. I've seen plenty of war footage in my career. Casualties, field medicine, things that would make most civilians uncomfortable. But this was different. The area showed clear signs of violence. The snow was disturbed across a 20 ft radius, dark stains frozen into the ground. One of the soldiers doubled over, clearly distressed. The dogs went absolutely insane. Not aggressive, terrified, barking, snarling, pulling so hard against their chains, I thought the handlers would lose control. One of the Dobermans, a big male, actually bit its own handler's arm trying to get free. The man shouted, "Let go." And the dog bolted back the way they'd come at a dead sprint. The other two dogs wouldn't stop howling, not the normal sound of dogs barking. This was high-pitched, panicked, primal fear, co-barked orders. The men formed up in a defensive line, rifles ready. They abandoned the remaining dogs, leaving them tied to trees where they continued their terrified chorus. The unit pushed deeper into the forest. The tracking sequence lasted 11 minutes, following prints in the snow, finding marks on trees where something had sharpened its claws, deep gouges in the bark that started 9 ft up the trunk. I measured using the soldiers as scale references. They found a cave. The entrance was partially concealed behind fallen rocks and dead brush, but the tracks led straight to it. The smell must have been overwhelming. Even through 80-year-old film, I could see soldiers covering their noses and mouths with cloth. Co split his unit. 2 men stayed outside as guards. 2 entered the cave with the camera. The interior was shallow, maybe 60 ft deep. The camera's light source, probably a military flashlight, created harsh shadows and pools of absolute blackness that the weak beam couldn't penetrate. They found evidence immediately. Remains mixed with deer, wild boar, smaller animals, all showing signs of scavenging, methodical. Then one of the soldiers said something sharp, urgent, pointed at the cave wall. The camera focused, scratched into the stone. Crude but unmistakable were letters. English letters, "Stay out." I paused the footage, rewound, watched it again. English, carved into a cave wall in Germany. In March 1945, when the only English speakers in this part of Europe would have been Allied soldiers, and Allied soldiers didn't live in caves like this. The soldier in frame reached out to touch the carved letters. His hand was shaking. That's when I heard it through my headphones, a sound from deep in the cave, from the darkness beyond the flashlight's reach. A rumble, low, resonant, felt more than heard. The soldiers spun around, flashlights swinging wildly toward the back of the cave. For maybe 3 frames, I counted them later. The light caught something pulling back into the shadows, something massive and dark, moving with disturbing speed. Then it charged. The footage dissolved into complete chaos. Muzzle flashes strobing the darkness. The camera shaking violently, soldiers yelling in German. The barking of the abandoned dogs outside mixing with gunfire and other sounds. Impacts, movement, confusion. In the stuttering light of the muzzle flashes, I caught glimpses. Just fragments, dark fur, a massive limb, something moving on 2 legs, but hunched low, impossibly fast. One soldier went down with a shout that cut off abruptly, too abruptly. The camera operator ran. The image became a blur. Cave walls rushing past, then forest, branches whipping across the lens. He ran for 6 minutes straight. I timed it. 6 minutes of flat-out sprinting through dense forest, his breathing like a dying animal in my speakers. And behind him, faintly, I could hear something else running, keeping pace, not gaining, but not falling behind either. It was playing with him. He finally tripped. The camera fell into a shallow stream, landing lens up. The water was crystal clear. For just a second, I could see the operator's face reflected in the current. Young, maybe 25, eyes so wide, I could see white all around the irises. Then a shadow fell across the water. Something was standing over him. The camera captured it from below, a silhouette blotting out the gray sky. I could see the outline of a head, wrong-shaped and too large, tilting down as if examining prey. The soldier started speaking rapidly in German. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone, pleading, bargaining for his life. There was movement, a brief struggle. The reflection broke apart. The image went dark. the footage cut to black. I sat in my chair, coffee cold and forgotten in my hand, staring at the static on my screen. It was 5:33 a.m. Dawn was starting to gray my windows. I'd been watching for almost 2 hours without moving. My notes were scattered across my desk. Frame captures printed on my cheap inkjet. Audio waveforms, measurements, all of it trying to make logical sense of something that defied logic. Part of my brain, the part trained in historical documentation and film authentication, insisted this had to be fake propaganda footage. Psychological warfare meant to terrify Allied troops. Clever special effects from 1945, but I'd worked with enough genuine period footage to know the chemical breakdown of the emulsion was real. The physical damage patterns were consistent with 80 years of aging. The grain structure, the way light scattered through decades-old scratches on the film stock, you can't fake that, not convincingly, not to someone who knows what to look for. This was real film from 1945, which meant whatever it showed. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I needed to move, needed to process. I walked to my kitchen, really just a corner of the studio with a hot plate and mini fridge, made fresh coffee. The thought of actual food seemed impossible. My stomach was a knot. While the coffee brewed, I did something I'd been avoiding. I pulled out my laptop and searched for information about the Harz Mountains in 1945. The results were extensive. The Harz region had been active in the final months of the war. Underground facilities, research projects, rumors of unusual experiments that most historians dismissed as Allied propaganda or post-war mythology. But what if some of it wasn't mythology? I found references to certain groups obsessed with archaeological and supernatural research. They'd operated extensively in the Harz Mountains, searching for proof of various theories through mystical artifacts and historical revisionism. Most serious historians considered them pseudoscientific nonsense used to justify terrible things. But what if they'd found something real? I searched for American servicemen missing in action from late 1944. The Battle of the Bulge had raged through December, Operation Northwind in January. The lists were staggering, thousands of names, men who'd vanished into winter forests and were never found. Most were presumed dead, bodies lost to snow and chaos. But what if some of them? I stopped that thought, poured my coffee, went back to my workstation, canister the three sat there waiting. I checked the time, 6:42 a.m. Wednesday morning. I'd been awake for over 32 hours. Every rational part of me said to sleep, shower, eat something substantial, approach this fresh. Instead, I loaded the third canister into my restoration rig. The transfer took longer than the previous two. The film stock was more damaged, moisture degradation sections where the emulsion had partially dissolved. I had to work carefully, frame by frame in some places, digitally reconstructing what time had tried to erase. 4 hours. By the time I had a viewable file, it was nearly 11:00 a.m. My hands trembled from too much caffeine and not enough food. My eyes felt like someone had rubbed them with sandpaper, but I couldn't stop. I closed the blinds, darkening my apartment, better to see the monitor clearly. I opened the file, took a breath, hit play. The third footage began differently. A man in a white coat stood facing the camera directly. Behind him, a makeshift laboratory, tables covered with equipment, maps pinned to wooden walls, the organized chaos of wartime scientific research. He was maybe 42, thin with wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. His posture was professorial, confident. When he spoke, his German was formal, measured, explaining something to an audience he assumed would understand the importance. An assistant held up a slate, Dr. Heinrich Voss, Research Division, the man who would try to capture a monster. And what I was about to learn would break something fundamental in how I understood the world. But I didn't know that yet. I just watched as Voss began to explain his plan, and I realized the horror was only beginning. Tape 3, Doerson Schlur, the scientist. Date March 28, 1945. Duration 19 minutes 55 seconds. Dr. Heinrich Voss spoke to the camera for almost 3 minutes straight. His German was formal, professorial. the kind you'd hear in a university lecture hall before the war turned everything into desperation. He stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back. Even through 80 years of degraded film, I could see the intensity in his eyes behind those wire-rimmed glasses. This was a man who believed completely in what he was doing. I caught scattered words as he spoke. Versigan. Failure, tier, animal, sold, soldier, intelligence, intelligence, strategy, strategy, gafang, nama, capture. His tone told me everything. This wasn't fear talking. This was scientific fascination. The kind of obsessive curiosity that had driven him into whatever research division he belonged to. He gestured at papers spread on the table behind him. I could see diagrams, sketches of the creature based on previous encounters, detailed anatomical drawings showing estimated muscle structure, limb proportions, skeletal composition, measurements written in precise German script calculations. Voss had been studying the footage from the failed expeditions, analyzing every frame just like I was doing now, 80 years later. The slate appeared. Project Natsold, Dr. Expedition. Gafang Nama Fazuk, Project Night Soldier 3rd Expedition Capture Attempt. They weren't hunting anymore, they wanted it alive. Voss continued his briefing. He pointed at a map of the Harz region pinned to the wall, tracing routes with his finger. Red marks indicated where Dietrich had disappeared, where Koh's unit had been attacked, the cave where they'd found the English warning. He was mapping the creature's territory, identifying patterns. He drew a circle with his finger encompassing maybe 15 square miles of forest, the creature's hunting ground. Then he tapped a location near the center. His meaning was clear from gestures. This is where we make our stand. His final words before the footage cut were in English, heavily accented, but clear. For the record, maybe for whoever would eventually see this, previous failures derived from fundamental misunderstanding of subject's nature. This is not animal acting on instinct. This is soldier acting on training. We will approach accordingly. The footage cut to field preparation at dawn. 8 men assembled in what looked like an abandoned hunting lodge, each checking equipment, preparing methodically. 4 wore lab coats over military uniforms. Scientists, though they moved with military bearing. 4 in full combat gear, veterans who'd survived long enough to know what they were doing. Their equipment made me lean closer to my monitor. Alongside standard rifles, I saw modified tranquilizer equipment. Large bore delivery systems designed to punch through thick hide and deliver sedative deep into muscle tissue. Net launchers, Militarira compressed air cylinders providing launching force. Nets woven from steel cable and the cages. 3 of them each requiring 2 men to carry even empty steel construction bars thick as my thumb welded at every joint with reinforcing plates. Triple latch mechanisms on the doors. These weren't designed for ordinary animals. I watched as they tested one, 2 soldiers inside pushing against the bars with full weight. The cage didn't flex at all. They also assembled massive cable nets, 20 ft square woven from steel wire. The plan seemed to be stringing these between trees, creating barriers, channeling the creature's movement. Voss supervised everything personally, checking each piece, testing cage doors, examining net integrity. The syringes were enormous, each one the size of my forearm, filled with amber liquid. A scientist held one up to the camera. German text on the label indicated powerful sedative enough to incapacitate large, dangerous animals. Maybe enough to stop what was out there. Maybe. Voss gathered his team for final briefing. The camera captured everything. He spread a hand-drawn map on a wooden table, pointed at a clearing marked in red ink, explained the plan with gestures and rapid German. They would use bait, but this time, they wouldn't just wait passively. They would create a controlled zone. The cages positioned in a triangle around the clearing. Steel nets strung between trees on 3 approach routes they'd identified from studying the creature's previous attack patterns. 4 men in elevated blinds. Platforms built in trees, giving height advantage and clear fields of fire. 4 mobile on the ground, ready to respond wherever the creature appeared. It was impressive, professional, the kind of tactical planning you'd see in military operations. The problem was their enemy wasn't operating like a normal animal anymore. The deployment sequence began at dusk. They hiked to the clearing Voss had selected, roughly 2 miles from the previous cave site. The location was strategic, natural funnel points in terrain, limited approach routes, good sight lines, multiple camera angles as they set up. I could see meticulous care with every element. Cages positioned first, each placed and camouflaged with branches and snow. Not to hide them, Voss understood the creature was too intelligent for that, but to break up obvious geometry. Nets strung between massive pines, 20 ft up, angled to catch something tall, steel cables nearly invisible in fading light. The elevated blinds were already in place, built days earlier. Each platform had a rope ladder and firing positions. In the center of the clearing, they placed bait, a goat. The animal knew something was wrong. Animals always know. It bleated continuously, pulling against the rope, clearly distressed. The men took positions as full darkness fell, 4 in elevated blinds, 4 on the ground. Voss positioned himself with the ground team camera operator beside him. Multiple cameras recording now, overlapping coverage of the clearing, professional documentation, scientific observation. They waited. The timestamp started counting. 6:47 p.m. The goat's cries echoed through forest. 7:15 p.m. nothing but wind in trees. 8:33 p.m. one man in an elevated blind shifted position. Voss hissed something, probably telling him to stay still. 9:54 p.m. the goat's cries were now. 11:17 p.m. nothing. By midnight I could see Voss's frustration, even through grainy night vision footage. The elevated cameras had some kind of low-light capability, everything rendered in shades of green and black. Voss conferred with one of his men and whispers, made a decision. 2 soldiers stepped into the clearing. They fired rifles into the air, 3 shots each. Muzzle flashes brilliant white in night vision. They shouted, challenges in German trying to provoke it. Nothing. The forest remained silent except for wind. The 2 soldiers backed out, returned to positions, more waiting. 1:45 a.m. According to timestamp, over 7 hours I could see the men getting restless, small movements shifting weight. At 2:37 a.m. Voss made the call. They were packing it in. The men started to move carefully at first, still maintaining tactical awareness. That's when someone shouted. The camera whipped around, one man pointing behind them. One of the steel cages positioned north of the clearing, maybe 20 yards into terrain, was destroyed. Not triggered, not knocked over, destroyed. The camera rushed toward it. Footage bounced with movement, but when they reached the cage, it steadied. The bars were bent outward, not broken, bent. Someone had grabbed them and pulled, applying enough force to permanently deform thick steel. The welds had held, but the bars themselves had twisted. The cage door hung open at an impossible angle, and the cage had been empty, never baited, which meant the creature hadn't destroyed it trying to get food. It had destroyed it to send a message. Voss stood there staring. I could see his face in night vision. That green-tinted ghost image, his expression somewhere between awe and horror. He said something in German, quiet. The creature had been there all along, probably arrived within the first hour. Watched them set up, watched them wait, watched them grow frustrated. And while they focused on the clearing, on the bait, it had circled behind and destroyed one of their cages, not out of rage, to demonstrate how completely outmatched they were. Voss seemed to realize this. He started barking orders. Quick, urgent, men scrambled to gather equipment, no longer maintaining formation, just grabbing what they could carry. That's when the sounds started. Footsteps in the forest, heavy, deliberate, not trying to be stealthy anymore. The camera caught multiple angles as men spun toward the sounds, weapons raised, but the footsteps were circling, moving around them, just outside range of lights and night vision. Then something flew out of darkness and hit the ground near the clearing. A branch thick as my arm snapped off a tree and thrown. Thunk, another one different direction, thunk, and another, thunk, thunk, thunk. They were being surrounded. The creature was throwing branches at them, casual playing. One soldier, younger, less experienced, started firing into trees. Muzzle flash lit up forest in strobing bursts. Voss shouted at him to stop, conserve ammunition, maintain discipline, but the psychological effect was clear. Then one of the elevated blinds reported movement. Radio crackled with urgent German. The camera pointed up. In night vision, I could see the blind 20 ft up in a massive pine, and above it, moving in branches even higher, a shape. The creature was in the trees. It had climbed above them, was literally looking down on their positions. The men in that blind opened fire. Camera caught muzzle flashes, bullets tearing through branches, but the shape was already moving, disappearing back into canopy. Then, from darkness beyond their perimeter, I heard it. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up. Not a howl, not a roar, something between the two, deep, distorted. It was mocking them. Voss's face in night vision was pale. I could see comprehension there, understanding that they weren't dealing with an animal. They were dealing with something that understood exactly what they tried to do. He gave the order to retreat, not calmly, urgently, get out now. Men abandoned equipment, left cages, left nets, left everything they couldn't carry while running. But the creature wasn't done. As they fled back toward the lodge, it followed, not chasing, following, maintaining distance. And as it moved through forest parallel to them, it started destroying their equipment. Camera caught glimpses in bouncing night vision, cages being torn apart, nets being pulled down from trees, wooden blind collapsing as something hit its support tree. Methodical destruction. The sounds followed them all the way back. When they finally reached the lodge, all 8 accounted for miraculously. They barricaded the door. Camera captured their faces. Scientists and soldiers alike, breathing hard, eyes wide. They'd come to capture something extraordinary. They'd barely escaped, and all their equipment, thousands of Reichsmarks, was scattered through forest. Footage continued for another few minutes. Voss trying to maintain order, getting head count, checking for injuries. No one hurt, not even scratched. The creature could have attacked at any point, could have struck while distracted. It had chosen not to. The final shot was Voss's face in better light. Someone had lit a lantern. He stared directly at the camera. His expression was complex. Fear, yes, but also respect. He spoke in German first, then repeated in English. This is not animal, this is soldier. It uses tactics taught in military training. Ambush, psychological operations, demonstration of superior capability. He paused, removed glasses, and cleaned them with shaking hand. Previous failures were not failures of equipment or planning. They were failures of understanding. He put glasses back on. Whatever this creature was before, it remembers, it thinks, it plans. Another pause, and it was wearing an American uniform. The footage cut to black. I sat staring at my monitor. 11:47 a.m. Wednesday morning. The creature remembered, it thought, it planned. It had been a soldier once, American based on that belt buckle. I pulled up my notes. Creature demonstrates advanced tactical thinking, uses psychological tactics. Could have attacked team but chose not to. Why? Destroyed equipment instead of personnel. Climbed trees, arrorail capability. Voss confirms. Wearing American uniform and American soldier in Germany. In March 1945, the only Americans there would have been prisoners or men separated from units during winter fighting. I searched Battle of the Bulge, December 1944. Thousands of Americans missing. I found him. Corporal James Harker, 101st Airborne. Born April 3, 1921, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. MIA December 18, 1944, near Strawborg, never found, 23 years old. I stared at his service photo. Young face, confident smile. He'd survived D-Day, survived Market Garden, survived the Bulge, then something in the woods got him. I loaded canister 4. The restoration took 3 hours. At 2:18 p.m. I pressed play. I pressed tape 4, die, war height, the truth. Date April 10, 1945. Duration 23 minutes 8 seconds. Voss looked terrible. Thinner, dark circles beneath his eyes, several days of stubble, rumpled uniform. This wasn't the confident professor from before. This was a man who hadn't slept in 13 days. Behind him, equipment had changed. Better cameras, portable floodlights, more weapons, but also medical supplies, restraints. Still hoping to capture it, Voss spoke for 5 minutes, voice hoarse, German coming in bursts. He gestured at documents, new maps, new diagrams, pages of notes. I caught key words: master, pattern, territorium, territory, verwund, injury, injury. Voss pointed at a new map section. Different area of forest farther north. He'd been tracking the creature over 13 days and he'd found something. The slate, final expedition, capture or elimination, authorization from command, 12 men, 6 with weapons, 3 in lab coats, 3 operating cameras. This wasn't science anymore. This was military operation with scientific oversight. Voss gave the briefing. His eyes kept darting to maps. His hands shook slightly. He was scared, but also excited. The scientist in him still fascinated. He switched to English for the camera. We believe the subject has been injured. It has retreated to a more defensible location. If our intelligence is correct, we may have our only opportunity. Pause for capture or documentation. The footage cut to the march. Professional documentation. Wide shots showing full team. They hiked deep 5 or 6 miles from the lodge into old-growth forest that looked primeval. Trees wider than I was tall. Dense canopy, snow still thick on ground. They followed territorial markings, scratches on trees, and deliberate patterns. The spacing became more frequent, more aggressive, deeper gouges. They were getting close. At 10:47 a.m., they found the second cave system. The entrance was massive, 12 ft high, carved by water over millennia, but someone had built a barrier. Stones deliberately piled, creating a wall. Carefully selected rocks fitted together, some weighing 200 lb or more. Architecture, deliberate construction. Voss examined it, gave orders. They started removing them. 20 minutes, men straining to move larger rocks. When they cleared enough space, the smell hit them. Even through 80-year-old film, I could see every man recoil, hands going to faces. Voss ordered floodlights forward. They illuminated the entrance. Voss entered first, camera right behind, then 2 soldiers, then rest of team in staggered formation. Professional, careful, weapons ready. The cave extended deep, floodlights pushed back. Darkness, revealing tunnels spiraling downward, natural formation worn smooth. Walls covered with scratches, territorial marks layered over each other. Years of them, decades. How long had something been living here? They descended. The timestamp showed 3 minutes going down into Earth. At the bottom, a chamber enormous, maybe 80 ft across, ceiling lost in shadows. The floor was covered with organic material, moss, leaves, fabric. The camera panned. German uniforms, American uniforms, remnants of insignia, mostly deteriorated, but still recognizable. Arranged deliberately, laid out flat, overlapping, creating a nest around the perimeter. Evidence of long-term habitation, not scattered, organized, methodically arranged. Voss approached slowly, knelt, examined. I watched his face in harsh floodlight, saw realization dawn. These weren't trophies. They were arranged respectfully, reverently. A memorial, one scientist called out. Voss moved to where the man pointed. Metal objects in an alcove. Camera zoomed. Dog tags, maybe a dozen pairs. Voss picked them up with gloved hands. Read each name to the camera. Voice shaking. Corporal James Harker, 101st Airborne U.S. Army. Private First Class Robert Ken, 82nd Airborne U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant William Mock, 101st Airborne U.S. Army. 6 American soldiers, all MIA between December 1944 and February 1945, all paratrooper units, all disappeared near Strawberg. Voss stood holding the tags. I saw something in his face I'd never seen before in the footage. Grief, not for his own men, but for these American kids who'd survived so much only to disappear into these mountains. Then a sound from deeper in the cave. Wet, labored, breathing, struggling. Every man froze. Floodlights swung toward the back. An alcove there. Something was inside. Voss spoke quietly, gave orders. His men spread out in semicircle, weapons raised, cameras positioned, professional, controlled. They approached the alcove. The creature was there, not attacking, not threatening, injured badly. Floodlights showed evidence of trauma on its left side. A significant wound, breathing labored, each inhale rattling, pressed against the back wall. as far from entrance as it could get. Not trying to flee, just waiting, eyes tracked the humans, yellow, but with awareness that was unmistakably human. Voss ordered cameras closer. They moved in 10 FT, 5 FT. I could see details now. The face was a combination of features. The bone structure underneath suggested human origins trying to assert themselves through animal characteristics. Body covered in dark fur, growing in irregular patches. Visible scars underneath in places, years of damage visible. This thing had been suffering for a long time. Voss said something, a question in German. The creature's ears twitched, focused on Voss. Then its eyes closed briefly, opened again. Acknowledgement, it understood. Voss spoke again, slower, voice gentle. The creature opened its mouth. What came out was barely recognizable as speech. Vocal cords weren't designed for it. Throat was wrong shape. Every sound forced, but it was English. Stop this, please. Wet, rasping, thick with pain, make it stop. Every man reacted. One camera operator stepped back, hands shaking. These were experienced military personnel. They'd seen combat, but nothing prepared them for this. The creature continued, each word costing effort. Can't control, pause, wet breathing, hurts every day, so hungry, can't stop. Voss found his voice, barely a whisper. You are James Harker. The creature's eyes closed, opened, small nod. Yes, how long have you been like this? The creature tried to raise one hand, too long, proportions wrong. It tried to show months. The hand shook, dropped. Since our den's December thought 3 weeks, but time, losing track of time, days blending, so long. Voss leaned forward. What happened? What did this to you? The creature's body shuddered, eyes widened with terror. Something in the woods near Strawborg. Voice dropped lower. Patrol December. We saw, it stopped. Breathing hard, wound clearly causing pain. Thought it needed help. We went. It was bigger, so much bigger, moved so fast, it bit me. Felt bones break. Thought I was dying. Woke up 3 days later, already changing. Voss's voice steady now. The bite, can you show me? The creature hesitated, then shifted. Moved fur on right shoulder aside. Camera zoomed in. A scar massive, fully healed, but tissue thick, raised, the pattern unmistakable. A bite mark huge. One scientist stepped forward with measuring tools, started documenting, calling out numbers. Jaw span 8-3 in. Estimated dental impressions suggest significantly large predator. Voss stared at the measurements. This wound is 4 months old. Harker disappeared December 18th. It's now April 10th. He looked at the scientist. Compare these measurements to the subject. The scientist hesitated, pulled out notebook, compared the jaw that created this wound was significantly larger than the subject's current structure. Estimated 30 to 40% larger. Voss turned back to Harker. What bit you? It was bigger than what you became. Harker's eyes opened. Terrible clarity, much bigger, old. So old, it spoke. Voss leaned forward. It spoke. It could communicate. Yes, German. Old German said it was sorry, said it didn't want to but curse. Curse is hungry, voice fading. It said curse passes through blood, through bite, waits for war. Voss tried to ask more, but Harker's condition worsened. Body spasmed, muscles contracting, sound of distress. The transformation was unstable, fighting itself, caught between states with no relief. Soldiers raised weapons. Voss pulled radio from belt, spoke rapidly. Response crackled back. Orders from command. War ending. Project shutting down. Conclude the operation. Document everything. Voss stood holding the radio, looking at Harker, looking at the dog tags. 6 American soldiers. Kids. Harker managed to speak. Please end this. I couldn't save them. He was crying, tears running from yellow eyes. Tried to help them. Touched them, trying to stop the change. Curse passed anyway. Couldn't save them. Please, no more. Voss looked at his men. He made a decision, nodded. Schnell, make it quick. 6 men raised weapons. I wanted to look away, but I owed it to Harker to witness. They did what needed to be done. The sound was brief, final. When they stopped, silence was absolute. Harker's suffering ended. Voss approached, confirmed, looked at camera. It's over. The footage continued. Voss ordered examination. Documentation for command. Camera moved in. The scientist documented methodically. The transformation caught mid-shift. Skeletal structure altered in ways that shouldn't be possible. Then he returned to that shoulder wound, measured again, more carefully, took tissue samples, preserved them. Voss watched. The scarring indicates the bite occurred approximately 16 weeks ago. The scientist reported the jaw that inflicted this was substantially larger than the subject. The creature that bit Corporal Harker had jaw span of at least 9 in. This is not the source. This is a victim of something far more dangerous. Voss absorbed this, looked around the cave at organized space, collected dog tags, nest made from uniforms. He kept them, Voss said quietly, the men he lost. He kept their remains, tried to honor them. He picked up the dog tags again. He was still human, still a soldier, even transformed. He tried to hold on to that. The scientist asked, "What do we do with this information?" Voss was quiet for a long time. "Then we document it. Command is collapsing. War is over in days. This project ends here. We handle this respectfully. Close this cave. The creature that infected Harker, the original, is still out there somewhere, but we are out of time." He looked at camera one last time. If someone finds this footage in the future, they need to understand James Harker was not a monster. He was a victim. The real danger is still in these mountains, and it has been here for a very long time. Final minutes showed respectful conclusion. They sealed everything, collapsed entrance. Last shot was outside. April morning light, forest quiet. Voss stood in front of camera. This is the final record of Project Naktat. The war is ending. This research is concluded. Voice empty. To anyone who finds this, we did not create what we found. We merely documented it, and what created it remains unknown. Pause. James Harker, James. Corporal 101st Airborne U.S. Army died April 10, 1945 in the Harz Mountains. May he finally rest. The footage ended. I sat unable to move. Thursday, 6:47 p.m. James Harker, 23, from Iowa. 4 months trapped, conscious the whole time, watching himself, unable to save the men around him, unable to control what the curse brought, asking for relief, finally receiving it. I thought about his family, parents who'd gotten MIA telegram, who spent their lives wondering they'd never know the truth. Maybe that was better. I looked at my workbench. 1 canister left, D-end, classified, destroy after viewing, April 15, 1945, 5 days after Harker's passing, 2 days before war ended. What was on this tape? My hands trembled loading it. The restoration began 6 hours, worst condition yet. 7:03 p.m. when I started, I tried to rest, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harker's face, heard his voice. Stop this, please. Couldn't save them. At 12:47 a.m. Friday morning, my computer chimed. The final tape was ready. I sat down, hands steady now. Whatever was on this tape, I needed to see it. I pressed play, tape 5, D-end, the end. Date April 15, 1945. Duration 31 minutes 47 seconds. The footage opened in the same bunker laboratory, but everything looked different now. Hasty, desperate. Voss was alone with the camera. No assistants, no soldiers visible. He looked terrible, like he'd aged 20 years in 5 days, disheveled uniform, bloodshot eyes, hands shaking as he arranged papers. He spoke directly to the lens. Rapid German, urgent, but I caught enough. Command had collapsed 2 days ago. The war was over in everything but official declaration. His unit had been ordered to evacuate, destroy all research, disappear before Allied forces arrived. This was his last recording. He spread maps across the table, pointed to locations marked in red ink. His finger tapped a spot about 5 mi north. Bazia, and after Anala, based on analysis of the bite pattern and behavioral tracking, he was tracking something, the creature that had infected Harker. The footage cut to field operation. 20 men this time, every remaining soldier Voss could assemble. They carried more equipment than all previous expeditions combined. This wasn't research anymore. This was about confronting something before they all scattered. They marched through the night. Camera work shaky, hurried. No time for proper documentation. They reached the cave at 11:37 p.m. The entrance was massive, 12 ft high, worn smooth by ancient water. The darkness beyond looked absolute. Voss gave orders. 4 men stayed outside. The rest entered. The tunnel descended in a spiral, 200 ft down. The walls covered in scratch marks layered over each other. Years of them, decades, they reached the chamber, enormous, 80 ft across, floor covered with evidence of long habitation. Thousands of markers. Some of them looked very old, deteriorated in ways suggesting decades of occupation. Whatever lived here had been here for a very long time. One scientist examined the wall, called Voss over excitedly. Scratches in the stone, not random deliberate patterns, symbols repeated. Then Voss pointed at the far wall, more scratches, different tally marks, hundreds of them, organized in groups of 5. Someone had been counting, keeping track of time for decades. That's when I heard it through the speakers, sound from the tunnel, something coming down fast. Heavy footsteps echoing, growing louder. Voss shouted orders. Men scrambled into position, weapons raised. The creature entered the chamber. It was massive. 9 feet tall, maybe more. Shoulders 4 feet across, covered in dark fur, matted with gray, marked from countless encounters. The head was ancient, primal intelligence in those yellow eyes that was unmistakable and terrible. Around its neck, a chain, military issue, oxidized and old. Hanging from it were dog tags, American dog tags. The creature stood at the tunnel entrance, completely still, studying the humans who'd invaded its home. 8 full seconds of assessment. Then one soldier, nervous, trigger-happy, fired. The impact hit the creature's shoulder. It looked down at the wound, then back at the soldier. The expression on its face was almost disappointed. Then it moved. The creature crossed 20 ft in what looked like a single motion, reached the soldier, disarmed him, incapacitated him with minimal force. The man went down but wasn't seriously harmed. The other soldiers reacted. The chamber filled with chaos. The creature was fast enough to avoid most of it, but not all. Some impacts connected. It made sounds of pain, but it didn't retreat. It defended itself. 90 seconds of intense confrontation. The creature moved through soldiers methodically, disabling threats, targeting weapons first, intelligent tactics, each movement efficient, practiced. It wasn't fighting with rage. It was fighting with military precision. The confrontation ended with Voss and 2 soldiers backed against the wall, their weapons gone, surrounded by incapacitated colleagues. The creature stood in the center, showing signs of injury, breathing heavy but controlled. It looked at Voss, and Voss somehow found his voice. Waram, why? You were human once. Why? The creature tilted its head, the gesture disturbingly human, curious, almost gentle. It approached Voss slowly, lowered itself until they were face to face. Voss was shaking. The camera captured terror barely held in check. The creature opened its mouth, spoke. The voice was deeper than Harker's had been, more practiced at forcing human words through an inhuman throat, accented German. Mensch Verlangardite, I was human a long time ago. Voss whispered, how long? The creature closed its eyes. 1871, Franco-Russian. The Franco-Russian War 74 years ago. Voss's face went white. That's impossible. The creature touched the dog tags around its neck. Careful, almost reverent. American 1918, Grand Gare. He came to me dying. Voice broke slightly. I tried to save him. Curse passed. Words came slower now, heavy with grief. I did not want to pass it again, but war brings dying men. I smell death. I cannot stop. The creature looked at Voss with an expression I never thought I'd see on such a face, pleading, how many have I made? Voss, trembling, we found one Harker, American soldier. The creature's eyes closed. A sound from its throat, not a growl, something that sounded like grief. I remember I smelled his wound, tried to help. Curse is hunger, hunger is curse. Then I saw it, moisture in one yellow eye. It was crying. Voss whispered, what do you want? The creature pulled back, looked at what had happened, men down but alive around it. War ending, I feel it. Maybe I can sleep now. Maybe curse sleeps with war. It looked at Voss one last time. Tell no one, let me be forgotten. It turned toward the tunnel. Voss called out, wait, your name? What was your name? The creature stopped, didn't turn around. Long pause, then Wilhelm, Wilhelm, and it disappeared into darkness. Sound of footsteps echoing up the tunnel, growing fainter, fainter. Silence. Voss collapsed against the wall. The two conscious soldiers stood in shock around them. Their colleagues were beginning to stir, injured but alive. The creature had shown restraint, even in self-defense. The footage cut to 3 days later. Same bunker, Voss alone. He looked worse, somehow broken. He spoke to the camera in English for posterity. Command has collapsed. The war is over. Officially, Project Nakodat never existed. Voice flat, emotionless. Wilhelm disappeared into the mountains. We found no trace. Harker was the only infected we confirmed. There may be others. He looked directly at camera. This footage will be sealed. If someone finds this in the future, understand Wilhelm was not a monster. He was a man cursed by compassion. Hands shaking, he clasped them together. He tried to save dying soldiers. The curse passed through the attempt to heal. 74 years of consciousness trapped in that form. 74 years of accidentally infecting those he tried to save. He looked down. We ended Harker's suffering, but Wilhelm is still out there. And if the war truly is over, perhaps he can finally rest. Pause. Or perhaps the next war will wake him again. Last words barely a whisper. God forgive us for creating wars that feed such curses. He reached forward. Screen went black, but audio continued 12 more seconds. Voss was crying quietly. Then the footage truly ended. I sat staring at the black screen. Wilhelm, German soldier from 1871, cursed for 74 years, trying to save lives and spreading infection instead. Harker, one victim in a chain stretching back decades. How many others was Wilhelm still out there? It was Friday, 1:35 a.m. I'd been awake for days. I needed to compile the files, send them to that PO box in Montana, complete the job. I stood up, stretched. My body itched. That's when my apartment door burst open. I barely had time to turn before they were inside. Men in tactical gear, moving with military precision. Hands, show me your hands. I raised them, stumbling backward, knocking my chair over. 6 men flooded my studio. Dark uniforms, no visible insignia, faces covered. They spread out efficiently. One went straight to my computers, another to the film canisters. A third started photographing everything. Michael Wren on the ground now. The voice came from the doorway. A man in his 50s, gray hair, dressed in a suit. He stepped over my damaged door. Who? What is this ground now? I complied. Cold hardwood against my face, hands pulled my arms behind my back, zip ties secured around my wrists. The suited man walked to my workstation, looked at my screens at the frozen final frame of Voss's face. Impressive work, he said. Clean restoration. Better than expected. Under what authority? He pulled out identification, federal credentials, but the specific agency information was redacted. Authority sufficient. He nodded to his men. Secure everything. Computers, drives, original canisters, every backup. They moved efficiently, disconnecting equipment, packing it into cases. My entire professional life disappearing. The tapes, the man said, crouching next to me. How much did you watch? I want legal representation. You're not under arrest yet. Answer the question. All of them, he nodded. Good, saves time. He stood. Bring him. 2 men hauled me to my feet, walked me toward the door. Wait, where? What is this? The suited man looked at me, eyes cold. Professional. You saw something that isn't supposed to exist. That makes you a liability. I didn't tell anyone. We know. We've been monitoring you since Tuesday. That vehicle outside. The odd phone call. They'd been watching the whole time. This was a test, I said. He almost smiled. Yes, for what? To see if you could restore sensitive material without compromising it. Without breaking, he gestured at my apartment. You passed. They walked me down the stairs. A dark SUV waited on the street. Early morning in Portland, and nobody looked at the men loading me into a vehicle. Or maybe they looked and decided it wasn't their problem. My cat, I said as they pushed me into the back seat. I have a cat. The suited man sliding in next to me. We'll arrange care. Where are we going? You have 2 options, Mr. Wren. His voice was calm. Matter of fact, option 1, you work for us. Sign the paperwork, help us with a project. And option 2, you're charged with possession of stolen classified materials. The tapes were taken from a federal archive in 1982. Possessing them carries serious penalties. I stared at him. You sent them to me, prove it, he shrugged. The PO box is a dead end. Payment was cash, no paper trail. This is coercion. Yes, but it's also an opportunity. The SUV started moving. Portland sliding past tinted windows. You saw Wilhelm, Harker. You know they're real. He pulled out a tablet, showed me files, hundreds of them. 419 catalogued since 1947, 60% in degraded analog format. We need someone who can restore them, someone who can work under absolute secrecy. He looked at me. You're alone, divorced, no family, financially desperate, obsessive about your work. Perfect candidate. And if I refuse, significant legal consequences, years of prosecution. I looked out the window, watched my city disappear, thought about Wilhelm, alive for 74 years with a curse he couldn't control. Thought about Harker asking for relief. Thought about 419 other files, other creatures, other impossible things. What exactly would I do? Restore the archive, document everything, help us understand what's out there. Why? Because they're real, Mr. Wren. They've always been real, and someone needs to keep track. I sat back, felt the weight of what I just agreed to. Do I get paid? Adequately? My cat comes with me. The man paused, then nodded. Agreed. The SUV merged onto the highway. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I could still hear Wilhelm's voice. Tell no one. Let me be forgotten. I was about to do the exact opposite. For better or worse, I was in this now, all the way in.